Welcome to the 5-Minute University Noontime Chat. I'm Leah Pullman, and I'll be talking to you today about mason bees. For those of you who are not familiar, the 10-Minute University trademarks include short-term classes, videos, and handouts on essential gardening information for you, the home gardener. Oregon State University owns the trademark, and Clackamas County Master Gardeners develop and manage the program. Today's presentation is just part of a series of perhaps 25 noontime chats in all. For the complete lineup, please visit the Clackamas Master Gardeners website. And let's begin. Today we're going to learn about the orchard mason bee. The things that you should be taking away from this class are learning how to identify mason bees, understanding the difference between mason bees and honeybees, learn how to attract mason bees to your home, know the life cycle of mason bees, and how to keep your bees healthy, and become an Airbnb superhost. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got started with mason bees. I was working at a greenhouse company, and a customer came in and mentioned that she had mason bees, and I told her I had been interested in them for like 20 years. And she said, well, I have some. I'd be happy to share it with you. So my first year, I got 13 mason bee cocoons, and she told me to keep them in the refrigerator until March, and then I did the research on the kind of things that I thought I would need to keep them happy. Got a wood block, put them out, and at the end of the season, when I started to clean my bees, I had, I think, 40, which isn't bad. The next year, I decided I really wanted to get serious about having mason bees in my yard and in my life, and to spread the word about how wonderful they were. So I purchased about 8,000 and have been going strong ever since. So mason bees, this is the picture you see here is the blue orchard mason bee. They're native to North America. They're an early season pollinator. They're one of the first bees that are going to come out and pollinate your flowers, your plants, your berries, your apples. They're very gentle bee. The males don't sting. They don't have a stinger at all. Female mason bees will sting if you trap them or squeeze them or abuse them in any way, and they have every right to. They're solitary bees. There are no queens. They're active from mid-March to mid-May. Also here in the Willamette Valley, Portland area, we have an introduced bee called the hornface bee, the Osmia cornifrons. This is an exotic bee that was imported from Japan to pollinate orchards. Started on the East Coast and just moved west. They share nesting sites with orchard mason bees, but they don't share nesting holes. They don't breed with each other. They're just hang out together. They're good neighbors. And as you can see down here on the bottom right-hand corner, here's two of them together, mason bee and the cornifrons. They're established in the Willamette Valley. Now, mason bees versus honeybees. When I tell people that I have a bee business, and that I raise bees, they assume, oh, I love honey. And that's just not what I do at all. And I want to help you identify the difference between the two and learn a little bit about them. Honeybees are originally from Europe. They are not native to the United States at all. Of course, they're everywhere, but they're from Europe originally. They colonize with a caste system and a queen. Each bee has a job to perform, and they work together to protect the hive. They will fly several miles to gather pollen, up to 6 miles away. Beekeepers need full protective gear to work with the hive. And the bees themselves carefully strip the pollen from flowers. They take the pollen and the nectar and they just work a flower until it's basically empty. And then they move to the next one. They're quite precise. Mason bees, on the other hand, the blue orchard bees, are native to North America. They're solitary. They have no hive structure and they have no queen. And basically they nest in what you see here, holes. They're happy to be in close proximity, but they don't share nesting holes and they don't have a hive structure. They only travel 300 feet. That's kind of their operating range. Why is that important? Well, if you have mason bees in your garden, you want them to pollinate your garden. Honeybees, like I say, will go 600 feet away. Most of us, have 300 feet is a pretty good sized lot, but it's kind of your area. And so they're working your plants and doing good things for you. You don't need any protective clothing when you're working with mason bees. Actually, you don't work with them much at all. But it's really fun to be close to the nesting areas and watch them. And I can stand right in front of it and they just back and forth and no problem. Mason bees will also work longer hours and in colder temperatures than honeybees. Mason bees will start being active at about 50 degrees. Honeybees wait until it's 54 to 58 degrees. Mason bees start really early in the morning and they work till late at night. I mean, this is your original worker bee right here. They're just, they've got a short time that they're active and they make the most of it. To pollinate an orchard, let's say we have this fruit tree we want to pollinate. To get this tree pollinated well, it would take 7 mason bee visits. To have a honeybees pollinate this tree, it would take 354 honeybee visits. Now, why is that? Part of the reason is that mason bees, I told you the honeybees are very particular and precise and they, strip the flowers. Mason bees are not like that at all. They just kind of crash into the flowers, take a pollen bath and move on to the next one. If you might have remembered the first picture that we had, there were little hairs all over. Pollen just gets everywhere. And so they're really good pollinators because they're just spewing the pollen everywhere and going from flower to flower to flower. Plus, they only have 300 feet that they go, so they're back and forth quite easily. The honeybees honeybees will, like I say, strip the flowers, take a long time to do it, and they may be, go far away to do it. Okay, mason bee nesting habits. You've seen that they don't require a hive. And in nature, naturally they will go into hollow reeds, natural cavities with holes made by birds or other insects. And basically they will find any appropriate size hole and go ahead and lay an egg in it. So here's a mason bee in siding. And here's some in an electrical outlet. It's just like, oh, that looks about the right size. And so that's where they lay their egg. Now, if we're trying to promote mason bees, take care of them, give them great places to live and produce, mason bee nest boxes are really a great thing to have. This is a bee house with nesting material and an emergent box. We'll talk a little bit more about that. People have kind of cobbled together all different kinds of interesting ways to take care of the bees. This PVC pipe, very simple to make. And you notice it's got an angled lip here because you want to protect the straws, the nesting material from the weather. Here, holes drilled in a wood block right here. And they have an insert of tubes. And then here's tubes and insert in a mason bee house right here. They're just laying in there. And you can see how active everybody is with all the bees flying around. Nesting materials. There are two main types of nesting materials that are basically, I recommend because they're easy to take care of and they're easy to obtain. The first one is a bee block, and it's made out of wood with grooves cut in it of the appropriate size. And you can just stack a whole bunch of them together and then tie them together. This has got a rubber band tie. You want to take the back and cover it so that it's dark, because when they're nesting naturally, they don't look for something that has light at the end of the tunnel. They're looking for something that stops and they can protect. Craft tubes with paper tube inserts are another one of my favorites. The craft tubes are very sturdy. They can be used year after year after year. And then you have these white tubes that just slip right in. I buy the ones that are pre-slit so they're easier to take apart when time comes to harvest the bees. But they also have some that are not, and you can just kind of unroll them, or you can soak them in water and get them clean. But these are two of the really, really easily available and very good for the bees. Emergence containers. So in March, when it's time for the bees to go out, the first year I had no idea what to do, so I just put them on a plate on top of the bee block, and it worked, but that's not the best way to do it. So here's just some homemade emergent containers. You want the hole to be 3/8 of an inch at one end. You want it protected from light with a clear path to the emergence hole. You leave lots of room for the bees. Keep it less than half full. Drill small air holes in an airtight container and keep it out of rain. So this is a medicine bottle, which I have lots of. And this one I drilled really tiny holes. Not only I keep the hole covered, the emergent hole covered with a piece of tape until it's time for them to be released. And so I'll take and drill very small holes in the bottom and a few around before I put the bees in, obviously. This is an old slide box for film slides. This is a business card box. This is a mailing tube. There's just a lot of different ways to do it very inexpensively. Okay, now that you've seen the basics, here are some guidelines to becoming a Mason Bee Airbnb superhost. Prepare guest-friendly accommodations. Give them a cozy space. Mason bee houses should be sheltered from the weather. Facing south or southeast is best, and 3 to 6 feet from the ground. I tried an experiment 2 years ago and put one on a stump on the ground. And when I went back a couple of weeks later to check on it, most of the tubes had been pulled out and someone had eaten things. So 3 to 6 feet, I usually keep mine around 5 feet, which is my eye level. And keep an eye on them. You want clean bedding with quality sheets. Now for a mason bee, this would be fresh nesting materials. If you're using wood blocks, it's been cleaned, fresh tubes, just nice, fresh, clean material. And then a gathering space. And in the emergent box, I call it a container with blackout curtains. So it's very dark, and then it's like, okay, it's time to leave, and they go out into the daylight. Now, oftentimes, our weather in Oregon is kind of iffy. We've had fantastic weather the past few days, and I would think, oh, okay, maybe it's time to put the bees out. Often, as soon as I do that, we get terrible rain, it's cold, and some of the bees have hatched, and then they're going, well, this isn't fun. And so they'll go back into the emergent box and hang out until the weather warms up again. Kind of fun to see. Another thing for an Airbnb superhost, and if you've ever done this and you have a host that provides snacks, it's really wonderful. So you want to provide pollen producers within 300 feet of their nest. They like composite flowers and open petals like dandelion and fruit tree blossoms. They also like early blossoms like blueberry and andromedas bushes, Pieris japonica. These are the things that they like, but basically they're kind of like where they look for housing. They'll take anything that's available. But if you've got something right to hand, they're happier, you're happier. Last year, I put a set of mason bee blocks I have a apple tree espalier on a fence, and I put it right there. Oh, we got so many apples last fall. It was just great. They really did a good job. Another thing that is really important for mason bees is mud. This is a reason they're called mason bees, is because they take mud and they cover up, they do a mud plug, they'll lay a larva, and each of the larvae is separated with a mud plug. So they have to have it really close by. It's best if they should have, it's more clay than silt or sand. And then if you've got mulch in your garden, remove it all so that they can get to the native soil. Mulch is not really usable for them. You don't have a mud hole available, create your own. You can use milk gallon jug or something that you can fill with water, and then just drill a little hole so that you've constantly got a little drip of water going through, so you've got nice mud. You don't want it right underneath the nest, just a few feet away though is good. And think about it. If you're a mason bee and you're working hard, you're pollinating, you're laying eggs, you want something really close by to get the mud and take it back to your nesting hole, because it gets exhausting. So if there's no mud around, the bees will leave and find someplace else to nest. And what's the point of that? And if you are very lucky, you will have a helper who will prepare your mud source with you.
What you doing? What you doing? Are you helping Mama dig? Yes, you are.
That's my buddy Barkley. Okay. Costco, to name one place, has started selling these mason bee houses. And this is just not okay. They're cute. This is one I bought myself when I first got into mason bees, and I thought, oh, that's so cute, I love it. But it's really bad for the bees. There's no overhang protection. It's filled with reeds that can't be removed. This is a perfect storm for mold, mites, and chalkroot. We'll talk a little bit more about those later. Also, if you want to take a piece of wood and drill holes in it and put tubes in it, that's fine, but don't use plastic straws because they don't breathe and the bees will suffocate. So they're laying the eggs, they're putting the mud plugs in, and then they're surrounded by plastic and they have no way to breathe. So they'll just die. Let's look at the life cycle of a mason bee. They emerge from the nest in early spring, males first. Female bees have a choice as to what kind of egg they lay. And toward the back of the nest, they lay eggs that will become female. And at the front 3 inches of, if they're using like a 6-inch tube, they lay the males. So the males come out first and they're ready to go. And then the females come out. Mating occurs, and then the males die. You just don't see them after that. 3 to 4 days after mating, females begin nesting. She places a mud hole at the back of the tube, and she lays an egg. She visits 75 to 150 flowers a day, collects pollen and nectar from flowers. She'll make 15 to 20 loads. When she has enough pollen and nectar, she lays an egg inside the nest, makes a mud plug, and then starts all over again. And here you can see she's making her mud plug. Here's a bunch of pollen, and there's an egg in there. Pollen and nectar, egg laying, mud plug, repeat. She can lay 30 to 40 eggs in her lifetime. Here's a great shot of females filling a nest. You can see each one has their own tube. Not quite sure what's going on here. Sometimes they get into a debate about whose tube this really is, but it always seems to work out. Eggs hatch in a few days. The larvae feed for about 10 days. Then it spins a cocoon. It pupates within the cell of the cocoon. And then by summer's end, there is an adult bee inside the cocoon. And that's where they remain until spring. So here's a year in the life of a mason bee. In March, it's time to emerge. This is a bee emerging from a cocoon. In April and May, they're busy procreating. In June, you take them, take the nesting blocks and nesting material, and you place it in protected storage. This should be someplace that kind of follows the natural temperature. So like a shed or garage, something like that works really well. I also take mine and put them either in netting or paper bags. And that helps keep some of the parasites and away from the nests. In July and August, larvae mature to adults. So by August, end of August, there's a full-formed mason bee in there, just kind of hanging out, hibernating. September to February, the bees are dormant in a cocoon. And in October, you take the bees out, and you'll have to put them in cold storage. We'll talk a little bit more about that later too. And then in March, it's time to emerge again. So here are some of the parasites and pests that can get into your mason bee box. This picture of the hairy-footed mite can give me nightmares. They're basically all over the place, and they will come into a nest and eat all the pollen. And then, so it will, there won't be any food for the larvae. Then they just hang out there. And then when the rest of the bees hatch, they attach themselves as the bees are going through the tube. And sometimes they can have so many mites on them that the bee gets too heavy and can't fly. Here's a Chalcid wasp. And they're so tiny, but they get in and they lay their egg inside the cocoon, and that kills the larva, and you get a wasp out instead of a bee. This is chalk brood, and it's kind of took me a while to wrap my brain around it. This photo shows larva cadaver. Chalk brood is a fungus, and so when the larvae are exposed to it, it kills the larva. And basically what you see are mummified larvae here. But they're like a powder bomb. So when it's touched, it kind of explodes and goes everywhere. So as you can see, like if you've got a tube and you've got some chalk brood in there, and the emerging bees have to go through the chalk brood, then it spreads throughout and kills the new larva. So anything touched by chalk brood needs to be cleaned and disinfected with bleach. Your tools, your nesting material, table you're working on, just keep it clean. Caring for mason bees in the fall. So here's a picture I took, and this is wood blocks. And I like this. It's really interesting. This right here, this line on the right are blue orchard mason bee. And this line in the middle are the Japanese hornface bees. And you can see how much smaller the cocoons are. And you can also see that they just hang right together. They're happily sharing the space. So in the fall, you take them and you basically take the cocoons out of the paper tubes and out of the laminate blocks. And this is why we clean cocoons, because this is what it looks like when you take them out of the box. This is a particularly bad one. Here's pollen mites. Here is some kind of cocoon from a mystery insect. It could be a leafcutter bee, not quite sure what that is, which would be fine, but it's not what you're trying to do. And then there's just a lot of dirt, bee feces. So you remove the cocoons and you clean them. And you clean them with a bleach solution, 2 tablespoons bleach to 1 gallon water. You keep the water cold because at this point, you want their metabolism to stay calm and low. So you clean them with bleach, you rinse them thoroughly, get all the bleach off, and then you dry them completely. I dry mine overnight with a fan going on them on a screen, but you know, any way that you can do where they'll stay cool but get dry. And then you keep them cool from October to March. And this is what they look like when they're all clean, much more pleasant to look at, don't you think? So what do you do if you haven't taken your bees out of the tubes and you've just got this set of tubes and it's ready to go, it's springtime? Before you put the tubes out, it's helpful if you take and you mark each mud plug with a marker so that as these bees hatch, they'll come out and then the queens will clean out all of this debris and then start using the tubes again. And at the end of the season, if you have all these mud plugs, the ones that were still have the blue marks on them, you know, are not viable. So you can get rid of those. Up here is a male emerging from the straw. Okay, it's March. It's mason bee time. So what do you do if you don't have bees? You obtain some. You either purchase or sweet talk a friend who has extra cocoons. It's always great if you can buy local and if possible. If you have bees, take your cleaned cocoons out of storage, set out your nest boxes and nesting materials within 300 feet of a food source. Make sure you've got your mud available, and then place your cocoons in the emergent box next to the nesting material. I always like to place it just like right on top of the nesting material. So they feel, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. And then you watch the fun begin. Here are some resources that you can take a look at. The Nurturing Mason Bees in Your Backyard in Western Oregon is just an absolutely wonderful resource. You get that through the catalog extension. And then there are 50 plus videos and 50 plus handouts on gardening topics from the Clackamas Master Gardeners website. I should have mentioned it earlier, and I hope you have been asking questions and putting them in the question and answer period. But visit Master Gardeners, cmastergardeners.org. That's the Clackamas website, and you'll just get so much information there. And I believe we are ready.
Okay, Thank you, Leah. We do have a few questions, but not a whole lot because it seems like you answered so many of them already. But Priscilla had a question. She said that she has a house that's filled with bees and it's looking really healthy now, and she wants to know if they'll come out on their own.
Yes, they will. It's they will come out when they're ready. The first year I had mason bees, I had them in the refrigerators I was told to do, and I just wasn't sure when to let them out. And so I just kind of going, oh, is it time? Is it time? And then one day I opened up the refrigerator and the mason bees had hatched in the refrigerator. And I was like, okay, they're ready to come out now. So I just put them all out. But yeah, they'll come out on their own. That's how they do it in nature.
Okay, this kind of is the same question you just answered, but Tony thought, so she asked if she can let them hatch from the tubes that they're laid in, but she wanted to know why, because you talked about taking them out and cleaning them, but she wanted to know why you can't let them hatch out of the tubes.
And you can, that's something that, they do naturally. But again, if you're trying to maintain a healthy bee population, it helps them if you take them out of the tubes and clean them. And that way you don't have the mites, the chalk brood, the parasitic wasp. I have found a couple of times I've left bees like in the tubes or in the bee blocks throughout the summer and not taken and sequestered them. And there's always a lot more of the not good stuff at the end of the summer if they've been outside and exposed. So I like to sequester them where they're going to be safe from parasites and pathogens, and then take them out and clean them. I've always had really good luck, and I raised 20,000 bees last year.
Well, then you know what you're doing. Okay. Sean wants to know if he can put the cardboard straws into holes that were cut into wood.
Yes, you can. You want to make it so that the cardboard straws are sticking out a little bit, because otherwise it's really, really hard to take them out. But again, that 3/8 inch, just cut it so that the cardboard straws will go in. And buy the white straws, or get your hands on the white straws, because that's all you need. And yeah, you can make your own bee block, and I think that's kind of cute.
Now, when you're talking about that, a lot of people talked about using just 4-inch, a 4x4, but the tubes are 6 inches long. So if you used a 4x4, should you not use a 4x4?
It's not a terrible thing, but the research has shown that 6 inches is kind of optimum. The queens will lay bees in the first 3 inches, the female eggs in the first 3 inches, and then male in the second 3 inches. When they're laying in shorter, smaller tubes or cavities, they'll lay more male eggs, so you don't get as many bees going through. So 4 inches isn't, like I said, they'll nest in an electrical plug. They don't care. But if you're trying to have a healthy bee stock and keep them procreating, the 6-inch tubes work best. So they're looking at research now. Will 12 be better? But 6 is just a really easy thing to handle.
Okay. You mentioned that in nature, they may nest in bamboos, and Jennifer wants to know if she could use bamboo for her own nesting tubes.
Absolutely. You will see in the like the Costco blocks, there's a whole bunch of different sizes of bamboos. So you will get, the mason bees will pick the ones that are the right size for them. And then you'll get other things like leaf cutter bees, or, lots of things like to nest in holes. You can, but again, the problem with bamboo is you can't really take it apart and clean it. And so it works, it's just not best practice.
Okay. Joni wants to know, how do bees do this naturally in nature? How do they, because they don't, obviously nobody's going to take them out and clean them. So how does it happen in nature?
Again, it's just they will lay their eggs. It's kind of like, I like to think of it as like, let's just say you have wild horses and then you have domesticated horses. So in a way, the wild horses are free, they run, they do their thing. They're often not as healthy, strong as domesticated horses. They have to fend for themselves more. That's kind of a weird analogy, but it's the best one I could think of off the top of my head. So they do this in nature just fine, but you hear about colony collapse with honeybees. Obviously, we don't have colony collapse, but there are pathogens, there are parasites, things that are just going to not keep your bees healthy. So yes, native bees, we have over 600 native bees in Oregon. Some do nesting cavities, some nest in the ground, and they all do fine. But I have mason bees because I want a better yield for my blueberries and my apples and my pears and nectarines, all that. There's a reason they're called orchard mason bees. And so I just like to keep them as healthy as I can and help them along. I like to be an Airbnb superhost.
Oh, yeah, and you very much are. Well, Joni also wanted to know, she's kind of confused on how the bees get in the emergence box.
That's a really good question, Joni. Thank you. I store the bees in the refrigerator during the fall and winter. And then I make my emergence box, whatever it's going to be, medicine bottle, box, whatever. And I take them out of whatever I have them stored in. I actually use Quaker oatmeal boxes to store my bees in, because it breathes, it's big enough to handle the bees that I have, but and then I just take them and put them in the emergent box and then transport them to wherever they're going to go, with tape over the emergent hole, because they'll come out really quickly when they warm up. I accidentally came in from a trip and put some down by my coffee machine, and 5 minutes later there were bees all over my windowsill, and I went, okay, what's going on here? And I had to gather them all up and then get them outside quickly, and then gather the ones that were on the window and move them out. So that's how you put them in the emergent box, is how they get. That's the short answer, how they get in.
Sounds good. Joan wants to know if you can take just the white tubes and not the cardboard, and just put the white tubes inside of the holder, whether this be the ones that unroll or the ones that are split.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Just make sure that whatever you're putting in there, and this is just so your life is easier, leave 1/4 of an inch of the white tube sticking out longer than whatever you're inserting it into, because to take it out, I use a pair of needle nose pliers to slip them out. I use the cardboard holders because they're just sturdier, and they come closed at the end already. And so the white tubes are clear all the way through. And so I put them in the cardboard brown holders because they're all set up for that. And they're much sturdier. So I can just put them in a can or in a house, and they stay together better. But you could try the white tubes, and that might work.
Okay. Lori wanted to know, are you cleaning the hornbees, the new hornbees, the same way that you do the masons?
Yes, it's really hard, especially when you have a multitude up, to tell the difference between the horn-faced bees and the mason, the blue orchard bees. The cocoons, well, you can tell them when they're right next to each other. When they're all cleaned up, separated, it's hard to tell. And I was really concerned about having so many horn-faced bees this year. And so I reached out to Oregon State University, a couple of people there, and said, so this is not a native thing. And I wanted to do native bees. And this is not my happy place. What should I try and call the horn-faced bees? And basically the consensus was that they're here. There's nothing we can do about it. So I just treat them all as one big happy family. And we go from there.
Okay. We have several people that are concerned about when to put out their emergence boxes, and the ones that have them in the refrigerator right now, when is a good time to take it out? They want to know if there's a certain day in March. I know you did talk about this a little bit, or they want to know if you have to wait until it's absolutely 50 degrees consistently, or is there a clue?
This is one of my favorite questions because every year I stress about it myself. There are two things that you look for when it's time to put them out. So you want 3 days in a row of 50 degrees or above. We have had that this week. So I would say, okay, it's time to put the bees out. But then when I look at what's available in my yard for them to eat, I have one dandelion. And my pieris is still in tight bud. The red flowering currant, which is one of the things that they love, it's still in tight bud. So there's not really much for them to eat. The apple blossoms aren't out. It's kind of a starvation city out there right now. So personally, I'm not going to put mine out probably until next week when things should really be opened up. I also tend to put them out in like a week or two apart, so that if I put some out and then the weather just turns terrible and they can't find anything to eat and they starve, I've got another batch that's ready to go right behind them. So I kind of put them out in two different sections, but I have a lot of bees, so I can afford to do that. So it's, there is just not a really hard and fast rule, but I just tell people, wait till it's warm enough and wait until there's enough food for them.
Okay.
And that changes every year.
Okay, great. And since you are talking about putting them out, this gentleman would like to know how many should you put into an emergence box?
Great question. You want them, it depends on the size of your emergence box. So you want to fill them no more than half of the available space in your emergence box. They need room. You can't pack them in. So about half full of whatever emergent box you're using is best practice.
Okay, and these are two different questions, but you can probably turn them into one answer. Shirley wanted to know, does it matter if the houses are in the sun and the shade? And another listener wanted to know if you have any certain houses that you recommend. You did talk about some, but what your preference is.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to hit the sun and the shade one first. It really doesn't matter. In the years I've been doing this, I have set them out. They say the best way is to set them east or southeast so that they get the morning sun and they wake up soon and, get working and everything. And I have that. I also have some underneath a tree facing north. I have some on my front porch, which is totally shaded facing west. Everybody seems to be happy. So it's not crucial. There's this would be the best way to do it, but they manage. Like they're really easy house guests. And what was the second question?
If you had a favorite, and that actually goes with another one. Priscilla wanted to know if you had a pattern for that cute little diamond-shaped house.
That is made by a master gardener here in Lake Oswego, and it's adorable. And her name is Debbie Thomas. And look for her on Craigslist. and she makes great little houses, and I don't have a pattern for it.
Wonderful.
My favorite houses, I tend to go on the cheap because I have so many that I have to put out. So it's like, okay, we can do cute, and some people just do absolutely adorable houses. The bees don't care. So I have used basically the, houses that look like a house with a little attic on the top from the Emergence Box. I've used just a plain box. I use a lot of fruit juice cans stuffed with tubes. And last year I ran out of pre-made houses to put the bees because I had so many. So I started using 2-gallon nursery pots screwed into a piece of wood or a tree or something like that, covered the holes so that it was dark inside, and then I would put my cans or my blocks in there. It all worked. So it's just like, necessity is the mother of invention. I like to have ones that are cute in the areas that I, in my vegetable garden and all, because they're cute. But they just have to meet the requirements of keeping the bees dry and out of the wind and protected.
Okay. Priscilla has a friend who put out some houses, but doesn't seem to be attracting the bees. And she wants to know, does she need to start over? Did she do something wrong, maybe?
Huh. She might not have any available in her area. That's hard to imagine, but again, it's like, is there mud available? Because they won't nest where there's not mud, are the proper flowers available? Should she start again? I think my first thing would be to check to make sure that I've got, I'm a good host, and then maybe buy a few cocoons. They're readily available. Like I said, I started with 13. And just kind of basically you're seeding your area. And once they're there, they'll fill up your tubes and then kind of look for anything else to live in the area, and you'll get more.
Okay. Nancy wanted to know, do you have a recommendation of where to get the straws?
You can go, I would Google it. And we have several suppliers here in the area. I buy mine thousands at a time from back east, wholesale. But you can, I did this morning because I felt this was going to be a question that was going to be asked. And I Googled Mason bee supplies, and there were like 5 that came up right in my area. So they're really available.
Okay. Do you know of any stores around that carry them?
I do, but I don't want to give one store,
Right.
a plug over the other. So Google
Okay.
it.
They
and
just
you'll-
need
you'll
to
find
kind
lots.
of, should they just sort of call up some of the farm stores
Yeah.
to see if they have any
Yeah,
available?
yeah.
Okay. You did talk about mason bees, some of the plants that the mason bees pollinate. Nancy, excuse me, Susan wanted to know what other crops there are. So you mainly also talked about these are whatever blooms early in the season.
Mhm. So they're great. They're masters at pollinating orchards. Okay, so the almond orchards down in California, I just sent a bunch of bees down there to do their job. But up here are apples, pears, my nectarine tree. I've got mason. I'm going to put mason bees right by there because I really want more nectarines this year. Any of the fruit trees that are in bloom between March and the end of May. They're great for blueberries. Things like your tomatoes, your squashes that are going to be flowering later on, that's not what they do. Things that are anything that's flowering between mid-March and the end of May, they'll pollinate.
Okay. I believe we just have probably one more question here. Oh, Priscilla's worried about handling the cocoons and wonders if you're hurting them.
You know, Priscilla, that's exactly what I was worried about when I first started this. I had a mentor who was teaching me about mason bees. He said, okay, so we're going to just dump these in this cold water. And I go, wait, that's, you know, and he said, no, they're fully formed. They're real bees in there. And I said, but isn't this, you know, hurting them? He said, you know, they're tougher than you think. And boy, I have found out they really are. I still try and treat them gently, but you're not hurting them. And when we had the power out and it was cold in the house, I was working with a few mason bees and accidentally knocked some over. And I apparently did not get them all picked up. And so for the past week, I've had mason bees hatching in my house. And after they've been kind of, you know, the dogs have been over them and I don't know where they went, but I couldn't find them. But boy, they're hatching now. And so we take them outside. But yeah, they're really tough. And the reason, like when you clean them, this is just something I found interesting. You put them in the bleach, but then you wash it off really carefully. It's because the cocoons are made of silk and bleach eats silk. So you want to clean it, you want to sanitize it, but then wash it off. And that's one of the few things that will, unless you step on them or something. But no, they're really tough. They're really tough.
Okay, great. Well, that seems to be all the questions that came in right now. If people have other questions, can you tell them where they need to go?
I can. If you go to, oh, Jane, I just had a brain freeze.
Metro Master Gardeners.
Thank you. It's not a big question.
Yeah.
Metro Master Gardeners has a helpline, and the three Master Gardener organizations, Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah County, all get together, and we staff a helpline where you can call in, or you can, it's better if you go to Metro Master Gardeners, and then they've got a form that you can fill out, and you can send pictures, ask questions, and then we've got people staffing that throughout the week, and they research, they get back right back to you as quickly as they can. I do have a cute thing about that. I was working the helpline a couple of weeks, beginning of January, and we got this note saying, my mason bees have hatched. I'm so worried. Isn't it too early? What's going on? And she sent a picture. And remember at the first I said mason bees were often mistaken as flies. Well, they were house flies. And I said, okay, this is good because, you know, here's what a mason bee looks like and here's what a housefly looks like. And don't, you know, people mistake that all the time. But that was just one of the questions that we get that, you know, was helpful. We could have a picture, know what she was talking about. It's great. It's really fun. I know you do a lot of work on the helpline too, but you get some fascinating questions and really great people to work with. So feel free, ask anything.
Hey, thank you, Leah.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
presentation. We learned a lot.
Thanks. Thank you everyone for coming. Really enjoyed being able to share my love of mason bees with you.